All right, for all of those headlines and more, I'm joined now by Sky News political editor Andrew Clennell. Well, mate, great to see you. So help me out here. You're a bit of a strategist. We're sliding in the polls, and it's been that way for over a year. Now, you go out there and say you haven't lost a news poll until you do. Have a listen.
I'm very focused on continuing to lead a majority government.
There are obviously news polls where you're doing better than other times and others where you're doing less well.
We're not focused on the polls because what we're focused on is cost of living for ordinary Australians. We're focused, we're doing the right thing. It's a very close poll.
You know, people are bleeding on cost of living. We've got a housing crisis. And then you go off and spend $4.5 million on a cliff-top mansion that would be beyond the dreams of most people. You do it just before an election when you're going to have to go out there and say to voters, I get it. I know you're doing it tough, but I get it. Now, I've sat in a lot of focus groups, Andrew, and it's not always the big stuff that cuts through. How does he spin this away?
Well, I think it's whether he can get away with it. So there'll be some people who defend the Prime Minister, say he's worked hard and come from a modest background. I'm talking about ordinary people here, Peter, because I've heard that a bit today. And why shouldn't he have a retirement home with his bride? But a lot of Australians also will say, come on, mate, you're taking the piss because we're all struggling here. You say you're going to do things about cost of living, say you're going to do things about housing. Couldn't you wait until you finish in Parliament at least? You're rubbing our noses in it, and you're not the man of the people, the man representing the poor that you said you were. But the question is, how far does it resonate, and does it, result in a poll dip? Does it become a Hawaii type thing that Morrison had?
Well, that's what I mean.
For example. And I agree with you.
What I don't understand.
That things can resonate like this.
Good luck to him. I'm all for aspiration. I come from a pretty modest background. Certainly my dad was way more modest than my circumstances. So I say good on him, right? Absolutely good on him. But he doesn't need to do it now. He's not under housing stress. He's got a taxpayer-funded, or 2 mansions. He's got other properties. He's selling one to buy this one, presumably. That's the transaction, or certainly what it looks like. But he doesn't have to do it right now within months of an election. So can't he see that this is a problem? Not that he's buying it, but that he's buying it right now.
Well, it's a problem too internally in terms of how serious he is about serving an entire second term. So it raises a whole lot of issues. Look, I broke this story on skynews.com.au at about 7:30 this morning, and when I first got the tip on this, it was one of those which was, is this too good to be true a story? Because it didn't make any sense. The bit of it that totally made sense to me was that I knew that his partner Jodie, who I think's been a big force in this, let's face it, came from the Central Coast. They frequently spend time in the Central Coast. Their entire family's there. I'm sympathetic to all that, but there's another argument that he got, I know it sounds ridiculous to say a cheap price, but a cheaper price with the 4.3 million because interest rates are up and he can be blamed for the stewardship of the economy. So it's almost like he's taking advantage of that to pay less than he might pay because this originally was 4.65 at its last sale. So, I've seen comments from John McGrath, the estate agent, saying in Sydney that it cost 21 million. That's true. It is out of reach of most Australians, and it does make it look like you're out of touch. So the question for you, Peter, if I can put you on the spot, and I mentioned this a couple of times today, you came up with that moniker for Malcolm Turnbull, Mr. Harbourside Mansion. What's your moniker on this one?
Well, I reckon it's Mr. Clifftop Mansion, or multi-billion-dollar beach house. I mean, most people would have to win lotto. I'm sure they don't begrudge him, but most people would have to win lotto to even imagine putting their feet under that bed, and moving in there and using that bathroom. They can't fathom that. I deliberately, at least once a week, get in my car and go out to a marginal seat. I just wander through a supermarket. I go into the real estate agent. I look at the prices of rents in the window. I want to get a feel like I used to in politics. I don't want to sit behind a desk. I want to get out there in the key marginals, at least in and around Melbourne. And people are bleeding, Andrew. Even to talk about a home worth that much shows that you and I are a long way away from the real world. But this is the PM on the cusp of an election. So here's one for you. What do you reckon his colleagues are saying? What are his colleagues saying to you about this? Because if I'm a backbench marginal seat holder in the fight of my life, I wouldn't be happy with him tonight.
Well, how are you if you're Gordon Reid and Robertson? He's got a 2% margin in that particular seat. And I don't think the neighbours of Mr Albanese in that, if that sale goes through, contracts have been exchanged, but he's waiting on the sale of the other property, but it looks like it'll go through. I don't think the neighbours would be Labor voters, put it that way. Someone actually pointed out to me today, Bob Hawke, before he got rolled in 1991, bought his house in Northbridge. So I thought that was interesting. It sort of goes to where you're at mentally as well, in terms of you're thinking, I haven't got long left. And that's the perception of it. I think it's an accurate perception. Even if it's your subconscious doing it, the thought is you should be focused on the job, as John Howard was, and worry about your personal circumstances later. Maybe ferret away some money. You don't pay for much as Prime Minister, let's face it. But I guess the new romantic partnership put a different perspective on the way he was looking at things ahead of the wedding. I really think that must have played. In terms of the backbenchers, well, the word judgment was used to me this afternoon. Most of them are keeping their heads down, I have to say, as they have for the whole of the term, really. But it was, and even this person initially defended it for quite a while, but then did use the term judgment. And I think that becomes the issue as much as anything is you say, well, you didn't have good judgment on the voice. You haven't always had good judgment on the way forward and how to sell things. The rejig of the stage 3 tax cuts, which was popular, was kind of Jim's thing that you adopted. So where's your judgment to get us into majority government again? I mean, I think most of them have given up on that. So they'll say, the backbenchers say, where's your judgment to get you even into minority government again? And that's why there'll be nervous people. Yet they see the polls, the backbenchers, they go, we're in a bit of strife. And then this can come as a bit of a hammer blow to you, frankly. And this is where I get back to, it really comes about the next news poll, and can he get away with it? And then can he get away with it during the campaign? Because I'll tell you what, Peter Dutton, who's got a bit of wealth himself, he's playing a smart game. He's not being critical of it, but he's saying, what about all the other homeowners? But the Greens...
No, but he doesn't need to.
The Greens can just open the shoulders, right? And they're the ones who've been taking a large slice of the primary vote of Labor for about 5 to 7 years now.
Correct.
So
Not
he's
about
just
the Libs,
opened the door for the Greens and their push for young people. What are young people who are never even going to be able to afford a home in a city like Sydney going to make of this? I don't think they're going to make much of it at all.
No, it's about the Greens. It's not about the Libs, and Dutton doesn't need to open his mouth on this at all. I mean, those pictures tell 1,000 stories. Hundreds of people have sent that, emailed it, texted it to me, the fancy shots, all of that. I think that's where I think the colleagues are like me saying, where the heck's your judgment, mate? Where's the judgment from your office? Because you don't just buy a house in a nanosecond on the phone. So he's had the time, and I couldn't scratch myself when I worked for a Prime Minister, let alone be a Prime Minister. Where's he get the time to do the housing inspections, to turf out the tenant, to do all the Section 32s, to talk to the agents, to talk to the bank? I mean, geez Louise.
Well,
this is where I want him behind his desk dealing with issues out of Gaza.
In fairness, he has a partner. I'm sure he has a partner. The partner can do all that.
I'm sure he has a say in this. Both of them will do something like this unless he thinks $4.5 million is spare change, mate, and he's happy to give her the credit card and away she goes. But he has to talk to the bank. He has to furnish all of his records like everybody else. So, again, I go to the point. All of these things, these fires are burning in his government. They continually go ahead doing the same things, expecting a different outcome. And as I said to Cos Samaras last night, they are now in a hard trend. The trend is turning into a spiral, but it doesn't look like anyone internally is trying to avert course. It looks like they're headed towards a brick wall and they're all saying, doesn't matter, the airbag's going to save us. Well, I don't reckon that's right. What's
going to save them? Sorry, I just didn't catch that.
The airbag. The airbag.
The airbag. Well, the airbag's the rate cut, isn't it? That's what they're hoping for. They've got one strategy, and that's to hope that Michelle Bullock plays ball. At the moment, anyway. I mean, this might develop. They say they have a second-term agenda. We'll see, but that's that's my read at the moment.
All right, we'll leave it there. Great to talk to you, Andrew. I tell you, I don't want to be in the city market if $4.5 million is a good buy. Goodness me.